So let's have the Pledge of Allegiance. Susan has the flag. I pledge
I pledge
allegiance
allegiance to
to
the
the
flag
flag
of
of
the United States of America
and to the republic
and to the republic for which it
for which it
stands,
stands,
one nation, under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible, with liberty
liberty,
and justice for all.
for all.
What is your pleasure on the consent agenda approval of minutes from our last meeting?
I move acceptance of the consent agenda.
I second it.
All in favor? Upcoming, the next Board of Selectmen's meeting will be Thursday, January 7th at 5:30, and we will continue with Zoom until some of these rates of COVID go down.
Thank you.
Any selectmen comments, announcements?
None for me.
Other than Carly, did you share the picture that Nick sent over? They've
Yes.
updated the planters at the cemetery.
They'll
Yeah, it would
probably,
be
yeah.
very nice.
Very, very nice. Great job.
yes, they're probably buried at the moment.
So, business items, you said that John and Steve will not be here tonight, so are we gonna, we will, table one, are we gonna table number two?
Perhaps you can give me a little bit more information about what you hope to cover with road maintenance. So that
I
we
think
can maybe take care of that in another meeting.
I think what we need for that is, we need a road commissioner's plan on how he is gonna achieve the road maintenance and oversight. I think my thought on that, and Suzanne and Madeline chime in, that we need some kind of rotation maintenance plan for these roads. I mean, culverts, is he gonna do them on a yearly basis? Is he gonna do certain culverts on a yearly basis? What is the maintenance, tree cutting?
Well, I think didn't we talk about having a set, I'll say schedule, like every 10 years, this road was going to be paved or whatever that was. And we tried to figure out how that was going to roll out as well.
Christine, we have that program that we purchased any number of years ago and haven't managed to get set up.
Mhm.
Probably is an updated version by now. What are the chances that we can get that going? I think that will help to get that organized once we're able to get the information inputted. That's a word.
Yeah, it would be very helpful. I contacted Maine DOT about a month ago, maybe a little more than that, to see if they could help us get it going, because I don't even see it on our server anymore. And I really didn't get much of a response from them. I can reach out to them again.
Yeah.
They haven't updated the version that we have.
Oh,
It's still the 2016 version.
Yep.
So if I can get them to help me get it on our server, we can get started with it. And I think it would be very helpful. If not, we'll have to come up with our own program.
could we maybe set a tentative goal of having that done, say, by the end of January?
I think that's reasonable.
That would give you and Steve time to work together and set up a time where you both be in the office.
Mhm.
Interruption. If we look back to a few years ago, we changed all the culverts in town. And there's supposed to be a record of all the culverts that were rebuilt and overhauled and hauled out, as well as some of the road repairs. And I'm not sure whatever happened, but that was supposed to be tracked 6, 8, 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Hopefully there's some kind of record of what repairs were done to certain roads at some point in time.
Okay, I'll look for that.
And I think what it is getting all that information and like she says, putting it on a spreadsheet or whatever the DOT recommends, a server, and have it.
Road by
so we
road.
don't have to go, right, keep looking for it every 5 or 6 years. Number 3, Human Resource Manual Review.
I sent each of you that very
54-page light reading.
long document, yes. I know it seems really intense. However, I think it's important that we have a document that lets the employee know their rights under different circumstances and also lays out a plan for when something comes up. With
Yeah. I was generally impressed. I think we get clarification on things that were a little fuzzy. And I was recalling, we haven't updated this since 2016, I think, maybe 2015. And at that point, we made quite a number of changes just to clarify things. But these things are definitely clearer.
I know, Christine, you said you were also writing job descriptions. Is that something that should go in this? Be part of it?
we have job descriptions for everybody except the harbor master. Some of his duties are laid out in the Harbors and Waterways Ordinance. They do need to be updated.
Is that something that we want to put in this and certainly give each employee a chance to provide their own input as well as we formalize this?
And they,
She must have a low
Yeah,
broadband or something.
everybody's probably working on the computer tonight.
Oh, now she's gone. While she's gone, can we just take a step back to number 1? Carly's asking if we need to formally table item number 1.
Sure, why not? I move that we table item number 1 until such time as Mr. Belanger and Mr. Reno can be in attendance.
I second that.
All in favor? Thank you. We've lost Christine. Carly's now the host, so we maybe want to hold off on 3 until we can get her back.
Yeah.
Can we move forward with the Broadband Task Force appointments? I got that in my packet. I think you guys have that too. It's the recommendation for all 4 of those individuals.
Yes.
So we are looking at Sandra Bascal, Elliot Rosen, Jordy St. John, and Robert Webb.
Steve Winter also there? I thought I had Steve.
Was that, do we have a 5th one? Yeah, Steve Winter.
Yep.
I'm going to move appointment to of those 5 persons to the Broadband Study Committee. Oh,
I second
excuse
that.
me, it's the Broadband Task Force.
Yep,
You second that, did you, Susan?
I did.
Okay, all in favor?
So Carly, do you need us to come and sign these?
Yes, if you could come and sign them when you sign the warrant, that would be fine.
Okay.
So I'm not sure how to proceed here. The next one is Town Administrator's Report. She's not on. Future agenda items, it would be nice to have her on for that also.
Yeah.
Do you want to text her, Carly, and see if she's coming back on, or
Oh, I'm sure she's trying to get on.
even if she just wants to call in? from her phone.
Do we have any others that's not on the list here that we need to talk about tonight?
I want to make sure that we, when I looked at the agenda, we put some things on there. I'd like to set dates, like we did tonight for January, end of January for the road maintenance on things that we have a definitive endpoint. I think we just keep putting them on a list is not going to get them done.
We can do that.
I'm trying to go back to the meeting minutes from last time because they had the things listed there.
Yeah, one of the things that didn't make it on this that we said was our priority was a noise ordinance.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
under
Yeah,
other, I guess I would like to have that.
Yeah, it's on here.
It was
On the
on the
page.
minutes of the last one, but none of these have dates assigned to them. I think I'm trying to go back and see where the,
Do you remember what the three was? I know it was roads, noise, and I think there was another.
the
Oh,
human resource manual, noise ordinance, road commissioner discussion. I'd like to add, that was yours, Kathy, and then I'd like to have an endpoint for the Wing Farm sewer line transfer. I'd like that ideally by the end of January as well at the latest. Trying to think what else. Madeline, do you have any other ones on here?
I was working with the Marine Resources Committee on a potential change in the marine ordinances.
and wasn't there something about something we had to do to make sure we hold the next town meeting at the correct time? Wasn't there something we had to complete or do to make sure that we had the meeting in May?
We backed into some of the ordinances on when they were going to go to the planning board and come back to us. And we did some of those things.
Thought Christine said something about she wanted us to put this to have a vote or something so that we could make the May deadline. I'm not sure what she was talking
Hold
about.
on, I've got, let's see.
Oh, was it the potential of the solar farm?
Nope.
Nope.
Just something she said we had to do so that we didn't drag this out like we did this year because of COVID. She wanted to make sure that we had something done so we could have the vote or election in May as.
Let's see, I've got,
Oh, well, maybe the school, because the school, every 3 years, we have to vote. We have the double vote.
Right.
We'll
So
have
that
to
might
check
be
and see what she was
so
thinking
I
of.
have on my notes, we have the waters and harbors mooring ordinance. We have the removal of the derelict boats. She was supposed to get a letter out to the boat owners. That needs to get added to this as well. I've got sound ordinance, the abatement process. Let's see. I thought she was going to actually send out certified letters to the boat owners. I have that on.
You're right. She did say that.
I have that on my note from last
Yeah.
time.
So you know what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to write these in and when we say a timeline, I'm going to write it down just to try to keep us on task and make sure that we meet these timelines because you're right, we're not doing a very good job.
So that what I have from the last meeting was that Christine was going to send certified letters to boat owners. Let's see if she can get those out between now and the end of the year. And then I've got,
What did we say about the abatement process? Were we going to review it or what were we going to do with that? Or are we just gonna get some standard operating procedures?
I think we want to figure out how we can manage it in a process. I think there isn't it doesn't appear to be following a set process.
Marine ordinance,
So I have the waters and harbors and mooring ordinance on here, which also had the derelict boats underneath that.
and on Steve's here, road maintenance planning and oversight, I know what we were supposed to do. We were gonna determine whether, Dave, help me out with this one, that the road commissioner, whether it was gonna be elected or assigned by the selectmen.
Well, that
No.
was supposed to happen at the next meeting, I think,
The,
the next town meeting.
the question was about whether or not the Board of Selectmen were going to serve as the Board of Road Commissioners or appoint a road commissioner.
Okay,
The
so we were
town
gonna
decided a number of years ago that the road commissioner was no longer going to be an elected position.
So
but
didn't
the
we have to take a vote or something, Madeline, to make it?
In order to change the ordinance, we would have to vote on that. That would have to be a town meeting vote.
Well, the question was, do you want the Board of Selectmen to still be the road commissioner?
Right,
And she had to put an article in next town meeting to
Okay,
get that out of there. So the road commissioner is the road commissioner,
right.
It needs to be
appointed by the
appointed,
Board of Selectmen.
And
correct.
that would involve changing the board of, changing the ordinance to specify that the road commissioner would be appointed by the Board of Selectmen
okay.
on
Well, that-
And that
probably,
has to go
That's
to
already
town.
covered. The question was several years ago when one road commissioner resigned, we had no road commissioner for a few months. And that's where the Board of Selectmen stepped up and said, we'll be the road commissioner until we appoint someone.
Would
And
it
that's
be-
what you had to correct, because right now I believe the Board of Selectmen is still the official road commissioner. It was nothing to do with electing the road commissioner, appointing the road commissioner. It was the fact that the Board of Selectmen was now, or is now, the acting road commissioner.
right.
And
And
that's,
there was
that's not a big deal. It's just a simple vote at town meeting to
Right.
nullify it.
Well, so if we're going to change the ordinance on that, would it be appropriate for us then to put a line item, should this happen again? We can then appoint another one instead of having the select board take it over until.
Well,
some-
they were going to appoint with it, but it takes time to interview people and appoint someone. So in the interim, the Board of Selectmen, it was in the summertime, there's not a lot going on as far as snow removal, snow issues. So the Board of Selectmen took it up as a temporary position until they appointed someone. But apparently the wording was not such that Sally Doggett approved it, the wording now. So it's just a matter of redoing the wording and a simple vote at town meeting to correct it.
But
Right.
should we, but at town meeting, when we correct it at town meeting, should that also, because we're changing that ordinance language, should that have a line in there that states, should we have a vacancy after the select board manages in a temporary format, that we can just simply appoint one and not go back to town meeting?
Well, that's,
we,
I think that's
we,
in there anyhow.
we have
The Board of-
we have appointed a road commissioner since the beginning of the road commissioner not being an elected position. The select board has made that appointment.
But we're still, in theory, he's really not it because we're still it.
Right, so the ordinance change would stipulate that the Board of Selectmen would appoint a road commissioner, and these are the duties of the road commissioner.
It shouldn't be a big problem.
No, I can make sure that we don't have to, that the language is in there so we don't have to go back to a vote like this again.
So it looks like.
Christine, are you with us?
Yes, can everybody hear me?
Yes,
Okay, good.
we're glad you're back.
Lost my internet connection.
Yes, gee whiz. You suppose there's a problem with rural internet connections?
I think so.
So when we lost you, we were talking about human resource manual.
Right. Yeah. what I was saying is I'm going to send it to Sally if you support it, and not exactly every part of it, but if you support having a document like this, forward it to Sally, have Sally review it for legality. There are certain sections that I want her to look at, including the new law regarding earned paid leave, which will affect us, and will also include fire department staff.
Yeah.
So she would need to look at those types of sections when she's done with her review, see how much she scraps and, what she supports. I'll bring it back to our staff, have them look at sections that specifically affect them, and then bring it back to the select board.
Yeah.
Would it be
For-
appropriate to include their job description, or I should say job descriptions generically in this, as it's part of the HR manual?
That's fine. I can do that if you want to.
I would rather keep the job descriptions separate, because if the job descriptions need to change, do we need to upgrade the entire policy?
Or you can label it Appendix A. So I just think that it should be appropriate. It should be part of the manual.
And I'll talk to Sally about that. I certainly think an appendix with all of the job descriptions would be helpful. And then
Sure.
everything's in one place, but it's not made part of the document itself.
Yeah, that makes more sense to me. I did have a question that I had when we first looked at this on page 24, about the dress codes. I would note that the mentioned articles of clothing that are not permissible generally tend to point to women's fashions, which seems unusually gender biased. And I would suggest that we substitute the language for something like, it is expected that employees will wear business casual clothing, or clothing that was appropriate to their position. That way, if somebody comes along with another ridiculous fashion, which could likely happen sometime soon, that we wouldn't have to upgrade the manual to say that you couldn't wear whatever nonsensical thing everybody decides to wear.
Yeah, I didn't like that section, but I couldn't pinpoint why. I think that's probably why.
Well, it's way too exhaustive for one thing, and then somebody's going to come up with something awful, and Carly's going to decide it is just the right thing to wear, and we'll have to just deal with it. Or
I think if you just put in there, no Walmart attire.
Well, I'm sure
Sorry.
Sally's
Fair
got the
enough.
language for that. I mean, I would just say nothing offensive, or I mean, instead of saying drug related, I would just say nothing deemed offensive, or any statement of any nature, political or otherwise.
Yeah, the state puts in theirs no, how do they put that? No, nothing that has writing on it, pretty much. It has to be plain.
That's interesting.
I'm sure Sally's
Yeah,
got.
and I think Sally will probably have some language that's ready to go anyway.
Sure.
So she can help us with that.
my other suggestion, having had a few incidents with the inclement weather conditions, when it seems important to close the office, it says with the approval, the town administrator, I think with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, it seems to me that if there's a storm coming, it may be difficult to get together a quorum. That it would seem to me that we could trust whoever might be the chair of the Board of Selectmen to be the consultant on that.
It sounds good to me.
Because it could be, the town administrator shouldn't have to be trying to chase down people in order to say, the weather service is saying that nobody should be on the road tomorrow, or this afternoon, so we need to close the office.
Could we take that a step further, and why couldn't that be the town manager's declaration, and then she needs to let the Board of
Just
Select,
to inform,
yeah,
that would work for me.
Yeah, I found out when I went to our website, there's got to be a better way for us to get notified that we made a change. I didn't receive an email until after I saw it on the website.
Okay.
So my just thought is you are the supervisor of all those people. You are responsible for them. You should be able to make that decision. So I don't think the chair or the board needs to. I think we just need to be informed.
I would agree with that.
I agree.
Okay, we can make some changes to that section then.
Just
So
don't
do you
let the
want me to
power
go
go to
ahead
your head.
and,
Just don't let the power go to your head, Christine.
oh no,
Yeah,
no worries there.
I make a motion that we authorize Christine to send this to Sally for review and regroup after she gets the edits back.
I'll second that.
All in favor? We did the Broadband Task Force appointments already, Christine.
Okay, good.
We approved
I
all
was
5
thinking
of
that,
those.
I don't know what you may have discussed, but I was thinking that perhaps they can have their meetings by Zoom. I think they'd all
that's a
be
good
in
idea.
agreement with that.
Yes.
And then I would be the liaison to the committee, and I'm thinking Suzanne expressed interest, so she could be the board's liaison to the committee.
I
Does that
agree.
make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Perhaps they can have a meeting in January. We can arrange that.
Sounds good. And we'll make sure we all get down there and get those signed so you can get those out.
So Christine, we were talking about when you weren't on the call with us about setting dates for items that we put on our, I'll say, list of to-dos.
Mm-hmm.
And so Kathy was starting to write those down.
We can do that probably as a future. Do you want to give your town administrator's report, Christine? And then we can go back to our list of future agenda items?
Okay.
Sure, that would be fine.
Okay.
Okay, I have a few items on my list tonight. The first item is Walden Renewables. I met with Paul Williamson, and we went over some of his preliminary plans for the town property. He went back and made some changes to the lease agreement that you reviewed before. And he just sent that to me yesterday. So I'm going to forward that to Sally, if you think that's appropriate, and have her look at it.
Mhm.
And I'll send it to all of you as well, so you can get an idea of what it says. We'll see what Sally comes back with.
Sounds good.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, I wrote the first draft of the reevaluation RFP, and I sent it to Juanita Hennessy for review. Since she has a background, she understands the language. She was very good, reviewed it right away, came back with some very good recommendations. I'm going to make some changes to my original draft and then forward that to Sally as well to see if she supports that RFP. Does that work for you?
Mhm.
Sounds good.
And then hopefully we'll be able to go out to bid by the end of January so that the Budget Advisory Committee has some figures to look at. And the final item I have on my list tonight is the Recycling Committee's recommendation to write a letter of support for recycling reform. I know that I think maybe all of you have seen that email from Lib Woodworth.
Mhm.
I didn't
Yes.
know if you wanted me to put together a letter to review at the next meeting and possibly even have Lib join us by Zoom at the January 7th meeting.
So how does that affect what we're currently doing with garbage to gardens and our current recycling plan?
This particular request from the recycling committee has to do with legislation that's being put forward by the state. I think that's what she was focusing on in her last email. Like I said, I think it might be helpful to actually have her or a few people from the recycling committee join one of our meetings so they can let you know what their thoughts are and what they're working on, just to get some communication going. And then you can ask questions of them. Would that be helpful?
I think so. I'm always a little leery about supporting specific pieces of it, of legislation, but I would want to see really what the proposal is and the committee's rationale for seeking the town support.
And if there's going to be any costs associated with our support.
Because we already have a plan in
Sure.
place with a lot of what we're doing.
I doubt that there would be any competition in what's being proposed.
Right. Is that everything, Christine?
Yeah, that's everything I had tonight.
Suzanne, you want to go back to future agenda items?
So yeah, well, we were talking about just making sure that we assign dates to projects that we put in place so that we stay on track.
Yeah, great.
So one of the things we were wondering about, a couple of things actually, and there's more. I'll just go over two that I have. We have the noise ordinance and a date when we're going to look at that. Certified letters for boat owners of those boats that seem to keep sitting
Derelict
there.
boats. Yep.
Um,
So I think
Marine resource ordinance that Madeline wanted to take a look at. Wing farm, sewer line transfer, and the abatement process. Did I miss anything?
Nothing comes to mind.
So if we could just kind of put some timelines on those things, what we're going to do, like the abatement process. I think what we're looking for, Christine, and maybe I'm wrong, is just an SOP.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. I can have that done by the end of the month.
Why
Darlene,
don't we-
yes, we are going to talk about the process later.
Why don't we give you more than that, Christine? Because the end of the month is like coming up really quickly. Why don't we say by the end of January?
Okay.
You've got a lot going with Sally. I just don't want to put so much on your plate that you feel overwhelmed and then.
Oh, no, I appreciate that.
Noise ordinance, what are we doing with that?
I have a partial draft ready. I need to tweak it and make sure it includes all of the issues that have come up during our discussion, because it does involve different types of noise.
Yeah.
And once you get that written, that's going to need to go to Sally too, right?
Right. Right. So she's going to have a lot of review.
But we're going to try to have that, have Joel Mary look at that too.
Yeah, I want Sally to vet it first to make sure everything's legal from her perspective, and then
Right.
have Joel look at it and see if there are areas that he feels that he can't enforce or that the department can enforce.
So when do you think
so-
you can get your final draft done on that?
Probably by the end of January as well.
Okay. Wing Farm sewer line transfer.
That's going to depend somewhat on communication with City Bath. So, of course, I can't control that. I can continue to reach out to them. But until they want to have a conversation about it, it's really not going to go anywhere.
Have they been pretty reluctant, Christine, or is it just the holidays?
Just slow to respond.
Okay.
And I think part of it is, I don't know if they're working from home or if they're in, the city building, or
Yeah.
if they have other issues that they're dealing with right now. Just slow to respond. I don't think they're disinterested. I just think that they have other things on their plate.
Okay.
Roger definitely couldn't find any document that involved what we're talking about. But that doesn't mean that one can't be created if the board is interested in pursuing.
So what do we want to do with this one? Do we want a timeline? What should we do next with this?
So we had some language at an earlier meeting in March. It looked like there was paperwork drawn up about the transfer. Has that been presented to them? What have we done so far?
I put together the information about who's responsible for what. That's as far as we've gotten. I've had conversations with the Public Works Director, and it's really the lines are our responsibility right now. We can go on like that forever, and it could be an issue can come up, or maybe everything will be fine. But if we want the City of Bath to take over those lines, that would be unprecedented. It would require legal help and support from the City of Bath.
Right.
So nothing was drawn up regarding that. We don't have anything for that right now.
And what has Bath's position been on this so far?
The Public Works Director would support clarity around who's responsible for the lines. Since they're experienced with maintaining the lines, it's just as well with him if the city takes it over.
So we'd like them to take it over.
But it really hasn't gone beyond him. It wouldn't be his decision. It's something that needs to reach the council. And
Right.
So far, I haven't been able to get past management. For whatever reason, but I will continue to reach out.
Marine Resource Ordinance. Madeline, what do we need?
I probably will not attend their December meeting, and so I won't be able to work with them until January. I think what we had talked about earlier was that if we can do it, we'd like to have a change in the ordinance to facilitate better enforcement of our ordinances. Whether or not we'll actually be able to get that done this year, I don't know.
Well, and I think, Darlene, we talked about this at the planning board from an ordinance perspective. Are we still looking at having their ordinance is ready for us to review in January to keep us on track for the May meeting?
Yes, ours, yes.
And so
Wait.
is the board on par with that as well?
January.
Yes, in a January meeting.
It won't be done. It won't be done.
Right.
They'll be ready. The list will be ready for you guys to look at and decide what you think is appropriate and not appropriate, and give it a priority list if you want to. But the list itself,
Yeah, not the ordinance done, just what we had talked about, just the wish list for ordinances in the January.
yes, the wish list, yes,
Yeah.
yes. The ordinances, no, but the wish list.
And then, did you ever get those letters sent out to the owners of those derelict boats that
Yes, they went out earlier this week.
And I'm sure we haven't got any response yet. It's too soon.
Oh, no.
Were they sent certified?
Yes.
Anything I'm missing?
I don't think so.
Arlene had a question on chat.
Are we talking about abatement process tonight?
Yes, it's part of the assessor's agenda,
Yeah.
or it could be.
Well, we've got it, yeah. So is there anything else under other? So then if we want to get down to business items, Board of Assessors.
Kathy, I have one other, if I
Okay.
could. A concerned citizen asked me today that how was the roads plowed in my end of town? And I said they were fine. I rode in town, they were fine. And this person said that New Meadows Road and Sampson's Crossing Road had about 8 inches of snow on them. And this is probably 3:30, 4 o'clock this afternoon. Any concerns? Anybody mentioned that today to the town office?
Well, they're not at the town office, so.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, I haven't gotten any emails.
well, I think somebody should check into that because this person was not happy that Sanford's Crossing on New Meadows Road were not plowed at all for several hours today.
Okay, we'll check in with Jamie.
Thank you. He did ask me to mention it tonight, so I told him I'd bring it up tonight.
I haven't left the house to see what it looks like outside, so I don't even know what the roads, if they've been plowed or not.
Well, down this
Fair
end of
enough.
town, the Hill Road and Berry's Mill were absolutely fine.
And it may be those bugs of, and we, maybe whoever's driver is didn't realize he had those roads. Well, that may be the first storm he cups here.
It seems to
Had
get
to be
missed every
needed.
year because it's down on the end.
What was that, Darlene?
It seems to get missed or not done very often at all because it's down on the end.
The
Because-
Sanford Crossing,
Yeah, because this, or, well, Sanford's and New Meadows, because the state will do from the highway to the corner store. So whoever does our roads has to pass that and go down the rest of New Meadows and down and do Sanford's and do to the corner where Mary lives.
Yep.
So every year, it just really piles up. It's pretty typical to see 4 to 6 inches down there. I just think that they don't bother because it's out of the way. And it's dangerous.
There's been quite a few complaints actually down that part of town on different things. I don't have my notes in front of me, so I can't tell you, but I did get a couple of calls last week to do with CMP and tearing up driveways and things down in that part of town. I'll find my notes and follow up with you, Christine.
Okay.
I'd also ask them to reach out to Jonathan because some of it sounds like maybe some illegal activity or something that may even need a planning board's approval. Because it sounds like they're putting roads in on other people's property without permission. And so I don't know what's going on down there. Something big's going on down there to do with CMP.
Where is that? Down on New Meadows somewhere?
Off in Sanford Crossing, actually.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna have to find my notes. I wrote it all down, but I've got all my notes from today and everybody else's notes. I got 6 books here full of notes, so I don't have it right at my fingertips. But
Gotcha.
okay, so
One more thing for other, did Christine mention having another warrant to sign before the end of the year?
Other than the one tomorrow?
December 30th, Julie's going to do a warrant. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's what I was talking about, just to make sure it's on their radar.
Do all three of us need to sign that end of the year one, or,
Yeah, everybody will need to sign the end of the year warrant. It's just
okay,
AP
so,
warrant.
tomorrow and the 30th.
Correct.
Okay,
Thank you, Carly. Board of Assessors, Vision Database and Workflow, discussion with Justin Hennessy. Christine, I'll let you take the lead on this.
Well, is Justin with us?
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Oh,
Hey,
okay. Hi,
hey,
Justin.
hi, Justin.
Hey, Justin.
Justin, can I jump in and just kind of go over some of the things that I physically found with my stuff first? Does that work?
It's up to the board.
That-
It's not my agenda.
Yeah,
item.
that works. That works from my
Fine.
perspective.
Yep.
Yeah, so, I mean, this, as you know, I have a tax abatement in the works, but this isn't really about my tax abatement. It's just about a bunch of issues that I came across trying to research and get the abatement kind of finished. I ran into a bunch of problems with documents, lack of archiving, consistencies between the three different data sources. And then I reached out to Justin because he's an assessor and I was trying to figure out really what the items in my tax card were saying and why they would be different from this one to the other one. And so I just really wanted to share with you the things that I found that just don't jive. So we have our commitment, which is in the commitment book. Then you have the trio data, and then you have the vision data. So looking at my 2020 taxes, the commitment page amount matches the trio record that I got. Now the trio record was supposed to be at the date of the commitment, okay? So those two actual values match, and that's what my tax bill was on. But if you look at the trio card, it has, you know, my name, my father's name on it. It does not show any tree growth. And the acreage is wrong. So there should have been tree growth and the acreage should have been different. And that's what the tax card was made on. That's what the commitment page was made on. But then if you look at the same thing in the vision, if you look at the same thing in the vision, I have tree growth on there, and then I have the acreages are correct, and the value is completely different.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah, and it's just none of it jives, and I can't make any sense of it because it's all inconsistent.
The vision software should be what's calculating your value, and that's being transferred to Trio exclusively for the purpose of generating a tax bill and tracking collections. The only thing that Trio really cares about for generating that bill is the sum total of land and building value. So it's not going to show a tree growth amount because Trio's not tracking the tree growth allocations. It's just being handed a total value from land.
Right.
Same thing on the acreage that's on the Trio card is not being updated when the data is being exported. So that's from before Vision was implemented in 2007 is where that acreage is on the Trio card. Effectively, they're irrelevant.
Okay.
If, and this is the big if that I wanted to talk to the board about, if the values in Vision are being entered correctly.
But they don't match either way, any of it. None of it matches. There's nothing that is consistent. And then when I tried to get an archived record of the 2020 Vision card as of the commitment or as of April 1st, it does not exist. You know, I go now and I get a Vision card and it's completely changed. I have, you know, Dad obviously is gone. So he's been taken off of that in the exemptions, but then I have different zones for the same property that I had before. So there's something really weird going on and I'm not sure how to move forward with it. And I think it just really needs to be addressed.
So Justin, can you help us out with this? Do you have thoughts? Do you have?
So I had sent all of you a fairly lengthy email, and I had actually CC'd Darlene on that as well.
We have it here. It's in our packet tonight.
We do, and that's why we wanted to invite you, because I'll speak for myself. I'm very confused.
Yeah. Without opening the database, I can't be certain what's in there. Obviously, I'm not your assessing agent. I shouldn't be poking around in your database, but I can tell you what I'm reading on the card, and it doesn't make sense. As Darlene mentioned, one of the things, there's just a lot of inconsistencies on the data entry on the Vision database side. This software has been in use by the town office for 13 years now, and it still doesn't look like it's being actually entered correctly. As Darlene mentioned, under zoning, I don't know if you've got Darlene's property card up, the December version that was sent to her. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 different zones being listed for the parcel for the zoning. Now, that's a labeling thing. It doesn't drive any kind of values or anything like that. That's just a neatness of work habits that's not in there consistently. And I suspect they don't actually match the zoning at all anyway. The bigger concern that I found looking at that one was the tree growth rate that's on the mixedwood line is actually the rate for Saginaw County for this year that should be for hardwood. I don't know if this is an individual override on this particular account when it was being updated, trying to work on processing the abatement, or if this was being driven by the table for all tree growth cards, which means that everybody's tree growth assessment is wrong, which would mean that you guys had undervalued tree growth on anything that's a mixed wood and therefore shifted tax to every other property owner illegally this year. That's a significant concern.
Yeah, it is.
That's what I meant in the email with you need to verify this. You need to get in the assessing database and you need to figure out if that 372 for tree growth for mixed wood is an individual override on this one particular property card, or if that's been what's entered in the tree growth landline table in Vision and therefore being applied to every single mixed wood line for whatever parcels are in tree growth.
So can you verify what you just said before you go any further? So this tax has then been what?
So I can't, and again, because there's no archive, I can't look at what card was committed for the values. I can only tell you the card that Darlene was given in December.
I can show you just 1 second here. Does it show
No,
my?
I want him to be you said that so that this tax was unfairly shifted. Can you explain that?
Okay, so when you look at the mixed wood line that's on the December version of the card,
Yep.
if you look under special pricing, there's a TG code that says 372.
Yep. And I've got your list here for the counties for soft, mixed, and hardwood.
Right. So mixed wood should have been $458 an acre.
Okay.
So if this card is specifically being overridden in the database to be 372, then that's your ideal case. You've only got an issue on this one card, which you need to sort out. My suspicion is what you actually have is the cost table for mixed wood, which is that code, the use code of 6010. That's actually a separate table in the database that's landlines. There's a code for mixed wood, there's a code for hardwood, there's a code for softwood. Their per acre values should have been updated prior to commitment to match the rates required for Saginaw County. What it looks like on this is the wrong mixed wood and hardwood were probably reversed. If that's the case, then you undervalued mixed wood by like $80 an acre, and that would be on every single account in town that has mixed wood acreage and tree growth, which means you undertaxed all of that acreage. If you undertax something, that means that in effect, you have shifted tax burden to every other property owner in town. We're not talking a lot of money here because it's only like $80 an acre, but it's still improper.
Right.
If you understand what I'm saying.
I am.
If that table is wrong and the rates are there incorrectly, my recommendation would be to contact your auditor from Maine Revenue Services and see what options you have to redress the error.
Justin, the one that's 372 is for next year's tax bill. That's the one for next year's. The one that I had for last year's, which was printed in September that I'm going by, does have the 458. So the problem wouldn't have been last year, I don't.
Respectfully, Darlene, I
Yeah.
can't tell you. You asked for a copy of the card.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
assumption is that when they gave you this in December, that this is what they had corrected the card to while working through your abatement process.
I have no idea.
However, there's no archive of what was committed in September, so I can't tell. I can't look at an as committed card to actually see what was committed.
Is that a
Right.
second concern, that there is no history of these cards?
I would see it's a concern, sure. I've noted over the years that this town has a more abatement activity each year than I would expect for a municipality of our size. I've gotten the impression from reading the minutes over the years and seeing some of the abatement procedures that there's not always clarity about what the value was and what it should have been on cards. And when you don't have an archive to refer back to, it's kind of hard to tell. It's hard to identify what was changed. It's hard to tell what the numbers were based on. So at any rate, looking at this, and Darlene, it would not be for next year's taxes necessarily, because there's no rates been issued for next year. So my concern is that they should be looking at all of the tree growth parcels, doing an audit of them, seeing what values were committed per acreage on anything that has mixed wood or hardwood, and looking at, okay, if it's got 5 acres of hardwood, it should be X amount of value, what was actually committed. Do the math, figure out what you had, see what you have in the tables. If you committed on the wrong numbers, you really need to contact Maine Revenue Service and figure out what your options are for fixing it.
Yeah,
It
no,
may
I
be,
see.
it's a small amount of money, so it may be as simple as it just means you didn't have as much overlay as you thought you did. But you know, we've understand that we already have a pretty big abatement to BIW, so you already don't have as much overlay as you thought you did.
And so what policy should we be doing with these cards if we're not archiving things? That's
So
concerning that we don't have a history to even look back and validate something.
yeah, I mean, ideally you'd have an archive each year as part of your commitment process. Once your values are committed and transferred to Trio, you would make an extract of the entire vision database. It's basically in the version you're using. It's a backup file. It's a DMP file is the file extension name in it. Hopefully you guys are actually making periodic backups. Ideally, there's a nightly backup of the database. I don't know what the servers are set up like, but your annual contract to Vision for the CAMA software includes the creation of one static database every year. And you hand that file off to them after commitment. They convert it to a database that doesn't change, and they install it as a static database. When you log into the CAMA software, you'd have multiple years that you can pick from. You can pick from your live database that you're currently making changes in of, you know, John Smith tore off a deck, or Joe Smith built the new garage, things. So you can make edits in your live database, but if somebody has a question, you can switch over and log into your static database and print a card as it was when you committed the tax.
And Christine, are we doing this? What are we doing here?
I can't answer that question tonight. I don't have access to Vision. I haven't been trained on Vision. Julie is the one who's been supporting Ron in his duty. I can have a conversation with her to see what she knows. I'll certainly talk to Ron as well.
Is there a
Are we-
reason why you're not trained on Vision? Is it just not, you don't use it? I mean, I'm curious. It seems like you would be trained on it.
We only have so many licenses. It's not something that happened when I joined the town of West Bath.
Are we just missing Darlene's iCards, or are we missing years of
Years.
information?
I can say
I would
that we
imagine it's for everybody.
Carly has some information from the inside.
I can say that we were doing a static backup every single year. I'm not sure if one was done this year or why it wasn't done. That would be a question for Julie, but I can say that we have in the past. And Darlene, when you talked to Julie about the issue, did you ask her about getting a previous one from the archive?
Yeah, I did ask her for an archive, and she said that you guys don't do them, that you didn't have any.
Because I know that they are on the computer, but I don't know how recent they are. But we were doing a static one, like Justin said.
I was gonna say, I can't imagine a town, and I hate to even think that we don't have backup of this. This just doesn't make sense to me.
No.
Yes, it seems that if we don't, there's a huge problem.
I would hope you have a static database. The other use for a static database is, are you doing personal property in Vision or in Trio?
It goes through Vision.
So the other purpose of a static database is you also have one for personal property, which means when the business equipment tax reimbursement forms come in a year later, you have something you can look at for a card to see what they were actually taxed on, so you can actually process those reimbursement forms. So if you're working off a strictly live database, that means any changes that are made between now and the time those forms come in a year after the tax commitment, you're not going to have any basis for processing those reimbursement forms for the companies, because you'll have no idea what equipment was actually taxed as of April 1st, 2020. So the last housekeeping kind of thing on there, if you look on the property card under the previous assessment section, there's a step at the end of commitment where you can save values. And it's just, this is a nicety. It's a shorthand. You can actually look when you're in the, someone calls the town office, hey, why'd my tax bill go up $40 or whatever? You can look at this screen and see, did the numbers change from year to year? What changed? So if you look in the assessment history, it looks like we've got 2007, 2008, and 2010, and then we've never done it again. It literally takes 15 minutes to do it, but it's a database process that's under the utilities menu in Vision. And then if you're in the assessing software, there's actually a tab for assessment history, and you can scroll down through it, and it includes in it things like exemptions. So you could go back and look, we pulled off the homestead exemption in 2009, or, it's a very quick, handy glance. It gives you a history, and it's built into the program. There's absolutely no reason not to be using it.
And I have another question. Are we not following state protocol? Are we supposed to have a licensed assessor, Christine? What is the status of that for West Bath?
Ron is certified. He's a certified assessor's agent.
So he's a certified main assessor who's been hired as your assessor's agent to perform the assessing duties on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, who are also the Board of Assessors. Right. There's a difference between an assessing agent and an appointed assessor. The final decision still rests with you folks as the Board of Assessors. That's why you have to be involved in abatement procedures, because he's not an appointed assessor, which means he does not have the authority to make those decisions on your behalf. He recommends for you, but it is not his final decision. Or any agent's final decision, taking Ron out of the question, agent versus appointed.
Do we meet protocol as the town?
It's perfectly legal to use an assessor's agent.
So Justin, what is your recommendation at this point?
Well, my biggest concern was the tree growth. I mean, that one, if that one is wrong in the database,
then
you need to research whether or not that's what you committed taxes on.
Okay.
And if you did, then I recommend you contact Maine Revenue and figure out what you need to do from there. I'm not your agent. I'm not going to advise you beyond that point.
Right.
Looking at the landlines, again, a housekeeping thing that I think is part of your issue on whether or not, on the confusion about, is a parcel discounted, is it not? You look at the appraised value and the assessed value on Darlene's card, on the December version of the card, they're identical. If you look at the sample cards I sent you from Brunswick, Harpswell, and Topsom, you'll note that there's an appraised value that's significantly higher than the assessed value.
Right.
Differences in the calculation between what the full value parcel would be if not enrolled in a current use program. The assessed is actually reflecting what it has been discounted to for that year by virtue of being enrolled in the current use program.
Right.
The reason the two of them are the same is if you look down on the landline valuation in the unit section, you've got a really weird unit price entered there under the softwood line and the mixedwood line of $27.85 per acre. I have zero idea where that's being driven from or what it's being pulled from or even why it was being used. Typically, those lines would be entered at a $3,500 an acre price, just like the 9 acres of land that's not enrolled in current use. If that were the case, then you'd be seeing a higher appraised value calculated on the land line, and then a discounted value showing on the assessed line for the current use land. So I don't know what that 2785 is coming from. And it doesn't even look like it's calculating property on the land values on the end. Essentially this, and again, I don't know if it's just Darlene's card or if this is workflow habits on data entry on landlines in general, on other cards in town. Is it on every current use parcel? I just don't know. I'm not in your database and I can't tell you.
Right.
But looking out from the inside, the data in the database for this particular card doesn't look like it's been entered properly. Okay. Now, to clarify, when I say not entered properly, I mean in the perspective of using the camera program, not versus what statute says you have to do kind of thing. The statute comes into this on potentially having the wrong tree growth rates.
Right.
Christine, do you have any idea how many properties we have that have this tree growth?
I don't have a number right now off the top of my head, but I can certainly find out. And there's no reason why we couldn't audit those parcels.
As an aside, I would also look at the current use, anything that you have in farmland, because at farmland, if it has wooded acreage in the farmland, that's also going to be at tree growth rates. So any parcel enrolled in current use farmland that also has wooded acreage is mandated to have tree growth rates.
What other significant classifications should we be looking at as well, just to validate other?
I mean, in theory, it would only be anything that's in current use of any kind, right? I mean, ideally, probably most parcels are probably still using landlines that were essentially set up when Vision did the reval in 2007. But looking at this specific instance, again, it's the tree growth stuff that was concerning me. So your landlines that say softwood, mixedwood, or hardwood, you probably have in the database table some stuff, other landlines that are, Vision typically abbreviates in like FL softwood for farmland softwood. It's a separate code that they use if it's enrolled in current use farmland. They may possibly be using it in parcels that are enrolled in current use open space. I wouldn't think it would impact current use working waterfront because that's kind of a different database setup. So tree growth parcels for sure, farmland possibly if they've got woodland involved in them, and maybe open space. But basically you want to be looking for categories that have to have their per acre rate mandated by the state on a county-wide basis that's updated annually. So softwood, hardwood, mixedwood.
And so if we've done these static backups that Carly talks about, is there a way for us to then quantify consecutive years in values? Is there a way, I mean, it looks here that Darlene only had 2007, 2008, 2010. Is there a way to?
So the 07, 08, and 10 are a separate save process from the archive databases. So you can actually save values in the live database and look at an assessment history on the live card for any year that you've saved a value. So that's a separate process that allows you to look at changes in values without having to log out of the live database and then log into the archive database.
So if we saved it every year, we would then have a numerical history, correct?
Correct. That you could glance at while you're on the phone with a taxpayer looking at the Vision database.
So okay. So that it's a process that we need to implement.
Right. So the save value history is just a 15-minute, we've moved values over to billing, save the values here. So I've got a quick reference on the screen. If you need more detail, then at that point, if you've done the additional step of saving an archive database, which as Carly mentioned is referred to as a static database by Vision, that's their terminology, but essentially it's an archive. Unfortunately, you have to log out of the live database and then log into the archive database to get to the account.
So if we have consecutive saved static databases, can we go
For
back?
example, in my town, I can log into every town since we implemented the software in 2007. If for some reason you needed to know what was on a parcel in 2010, I can pull that parcel up and print the card as it was committed.
But can we go back and create this in today's card? Is there a way to resave these to the card so that we have a more current history?
Only if you saved the extract files that you need to create them in the first place. So if there was no extract file created when it was transferred to Trio that was saved as and renamed something like commitment, or so if you don't have a snapshot of the data from that point in time back in September when you committed, any edits that have been made to these parcels since would be what was going into the static now. So if you didn't do it when you did the commitment, you've kind of missed the boat.
So we can't backdate and go back and kind of remerge this data into our current history.
If that's the whole point of making the archive at the time that your values are finalized.
Yep.
Is taking a snapshot of that data before you continue to make changes to the live database. Once you've edited them, they're gone.
So I guess I'm going to ask Christine what her proposal for next steps.
Well, I need to meet with Ron and Julie and have a discussion about whether or not these steps were taken to back up. And we'll need to contact Maine Revenue Services to see if they can give us direction about going through doing an audit of our current use programs.
I would, if I may, I would suggest that you guys actually look internally at some of your current use parcels and verify your tables before you start dragging Maine Revenue into it.
Yep.
Because if it's only an override solely on this card, then it's something you can fix simply without having to involve Maine Revenue. And it's basically I can't say no harm, no foul, because obviously it's going to be annoying to the Estabrooks, but it's something that can be sorted out. It's a different situation if it's every tree growth parcel.
Yeah.
Right.
So I would recommend auditing internally to figure out what you've got in the actual land cost tables and what you actually used on the commitment. And you may be able to do that even if things have been changed after. You may be able to look at some of the, grab some of the tax bills. Okay, hey, they had, especially if you've got one that's entirely tree growth, that might make it simpler to figure out the math looking at a tax bill when you're not dealing with building values and land, unenrolled acreage. And so if you've got a couple of parcels maybe that are entirely in tree growth, it's fairly simple of, all right, it was 12 acres of tree growth. It should have been X amount per acre. What value did we commit on? If the math matches, then you were probably okay. If the math is off,
It's in more than one occurrence.
correct.
And I guess we talked about this at another meeting. On every abatement, I asked that Ron keep a list of all abatements so that we could, I'm really concerned even more so now. I hope he's doing that.
Abatements, I hope you're keeping a list of abatements because abatements are required by statute to keep a permanent record of all abatements that are issued
I think we're keeping
forever.
paperwork. I'm not sure we're keeping a logical history.
Right. So I think he's keeping the paperwork, but we keep having the same abatements year after year after year. It should be
Audubon.
resolved.
Yep. It should be fixed and it's not.
I mean, how many times can you do Hamilton Sanctuary as an abatement?
That's a separate workflow issue. Honestly,
I know. I'm just trying to think about, how.
so
we
one of the
can-
last steps I do before committing is once I've transferred values to Trio, before I actually generate tax bills from it,
Uh-huh.
I pull an extract out of Vision, run my totals into Excel to see what I'm expecting to have for a taxable value, including looking at, okay, exclude anything that I know is an exempt property. What do I have left for taxable value? And then I pull an extract from Trio and see if the numbers match. With respect, if you're taxing stuff like the Audubon Society every year, that's something I would expect that you'd be catching before committing the tax.
That's my concern, and that's why I was hoping that somehow we could track that. So when we do this next year, we can look through the ones we keep having mistakes in and not commit without excluding them.
What process
make-
do you use to track your abatements?
What abatements?
Good answer. Had you had it, how would you track it?
So I've got roughly 4,700 parcels in Topsom. I typically do 4 abatements a year or less. And they're typically for things like, you know, they finally noticed after 10 years that they're being taxed on 2 bathrooms and there's only 1. Great, I'll fix it. I have an archive each year. So my typical process when processing the abatement, and again, it's a different process because I'm the appointed assessor. It's entirely in my authority to make the abatement. So my typical process is I will print the archive card so I know what I had to start with that was the incorrect tax basis, make the edits to the live database to what it should have been. That recalculates what the value should have been, and then I can simply do the math between, hey, I committed at 200,000, it should have been 190,000. The difference is $10,000 times the current tax rate. There's my abatement. I assign it an abatement number. I put it in my abatement tracking sheet that I have in Excel. I print a copy and I give it to the treasurer. I give a copy to the tax collector, and I put it in a hard copy book that sits on top of the file cabinet next to all the commitment books. So if anybody from the public wants to come in and see every abatement that's been issued in Topsom, at least in the time I've been there, it's in a hardbound book that's on top of the file cabinet, ready for public inspection as required by state law.
Just what I was recommending.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we were trying. I said we you know, we're doing the same mistakes over and over again, and it's.
Now, you know, it happens. The school district has a vacant land parcel and the exemption on it got missed. I issued a tax bill on a $5,000 piece of property one year. You can bet your bippy I check that every year now.
Yes.
Fortunately, it wasn't the high school.
So it sounds like we need to really start with looking at Darlene's property and make sure that we didn't.
That we didn't do it everywhere. We're hoping it's just you, Darlene. Not that
Yes.
we want to single you out.
I do hope that it is just me and that we can get this thing straightened out.
That's my hope, is that this was when Darlene was asking the questions and then as it was trying to be rectified, that there were some errors incorporated into the live database while trying to calculate what the card should have been that
I
mucked up this particular account, and that it was not systemic.
Yeah, I mean, because some other things just to point out, I mean, I've got last year's, which is obviously my father, and then I have a new one for this year's. It looks like everything's been adjusted, taking dad's name off and all that sort of stuff. But if you look at the values between the December of 2020 card and the September of 2020 card, the value of the base land changed somehow. It's the same land. The value of the land should not have changed. Yeah, the tree growth changes every year because it's a new value from the state, but the value of that land hasn't changed. So I was trying to figure out why. And if you look down the landline value section down at the bottom, all of these different factors are different. If you look at the acreage discount on the December one, they're all ones. And on the September one, I've got some 0.92s in there, which affect the value. You look at the C factor in there, those are all the same. But the ST index, whatever that is, Justin, those are different.
Yeah, so I can elaborate on that for you guys a little bit, but
I don't know what's going on and why why the base land value changed. All that should have changed on this thing is that his name was taken off and that his exemptions were taken off. That's it. And I don't understand still why they're so different.
so the condition factor can have stuff applied to it for You can apply those manually, and there's also condition factors that are table-based driven by how the cost data was set up. One of those potentials, especially on a large parcel, is frequently on excess land, there'll be a volume discount for larger parcels. The rationale being that there's a lot less buyers out there looking for a 30-acre parcel than there are people looking for an 1.5 acre parcel they can build a house on.
Right.
So you tend to not put quite as much value on the excess acreage. So when I looked at the card with Darlene, I was questioning on whether or not in that area there's supposed to be a volume discount for large parcels or not. So I don't know if that's table-based driven or if that was an override that was then corrected while I was looking at the card that should never have been there in the first place. That's a value model that comes into West Bath's market, particularly that because I'm not the employee there, I can't answer that question. The street index one is more interesting to me though. So the ST index, that's otherwise known as the neighborhood factor.
Oh,
That's essentially a multiplier for the desirability of the market in that area of town. So you're typically going to see the better selling areas of town will have a higher index there than others. So it's literally a multiplier based on what's the street index is there. So you see there's the 50 lines are a 1. So 50 is typically set up as an average neighborhood. That's what you'd expect most areas of town to be. The 40 ones may be land. It may be being discounted in the mall. I think you have a CMP line running through this, if I remember our discussion. So it's possible that it's intentional to have the 40 neighborhood for the land that's beyond the power line as a less desirable location. There may be access issues for right of way or something along those lines. But again, that's a cost model that's particular to West Bath, and I don't know your market because it's not my job to study it.
right. I just find it curious that it just changes.
It's a red flag to me that it's inconsistent. You would typically see the same street index for an entire parcel, unless there's something like it's divided by a road and one side's a neighborhood that's had better sale prices than the other side of the road. Or again, it may have been intentional if the land's divided by something like CMP, where you've got front acreage that might be more marketable than rear acreage. So there may be a rationale to it, but it's a question to look at. And again, we're kind of getting into specifics on Darlene's card, and really what I had concerns to the board was things that may have been systemic,
Right.
impacting every property owner in town.
Yeah, and I guess my point is there might be systemic inconsistencies.
That's true. There may be.
Hard to say.
So Christine, I guess how much time do you think it would take to analyze at least our tree growth cards
And farmland.
and farmland?
Sorry.
Yeah, I can't give you a time frame tonight because I'm not familiar with the process or the software. I would have to have some conversations with Julie and Ron before I can come up with a date. I'm really not involved in the process. I'd like to be, but
I think
it's
you should
something
be.
that I haven't learned because I expected that we'd be moving away from vision at some point anyway.
I would mention, just as an aside, when you're talking about changing your values in your camera software, you don't want too many cooks in the kitchen.
Right.
Part of your abatement issues that you're experiencing, if you start having too many people that have edit access to the database, you could be increasing those potential issues. It should really only be people that should
Well, there's
whose job it is to be
Not
editing the values. There's edit and review permissions.
Yeah, review permission. It should be a minimum for Christine to quantify that we're doing our job properly.
Yeah, I need to understand what's happening and why.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to editorialize there a little bit, but given my profession, I tend to try to be very explicit.
It's helpful, Justin. You have a perspective that frankly none of us have.
Right.
It's very helpful.
And that's what I am nervous about. I'm just going to put this out there and everybody can say I'm not being politically correct. I'm not sure Ron and Julie are able to fix this either.
I think one is.
I
Well,
think we
I
need to
think,
be very careful about not getting into personnel issues.
No, I'm just saying, I'm not sure that it may be part of our vision, all of our software and all the issues we've had with that, computer issues. I'm just wondering if we're beyond,
Absolutely.
if we got more of a mess here on our hands, and the only way it's really going to be resolved long-term is with the new software and reevaluation.
That's 2 years out. We can't.
I
do
know.
2 years. So we need to
And
fix
and
this now.
you may not get away from vision. You could potentially have vision as your only responder to an RFP. Just as an aside, there's not a whole lot of reval companies out there anymore.
And I'm just.
I
a little worried that if we
understand.
piecemeal this and do one at a time, and people hear about this, and then there's going to be other people looking at this. We got to make sure that what we're doing is consistent. Like everybody's saying, we are so inconsistent. How do we become consistent?
Well,
Right.
the first thing is to check to see whether or not Darlene's thing is unique or general. And then I think from there, we take the next step. But we don't quite know what we're dealing with at this point, about this particular issue. So let's let Christine go to work and do her detective story, and then figure out how complicated it's going to be and seek our best advice about how to move on.
So we do this process and we still don't come to any, I'm just wondering legally, other than main revenue, is there any other legal or people to reach out to if we still have questions after this review?
Like a consultant or something.
Something, yeah, because
Justin, any recommendations?
I think I should abstain from that question.
would it just be a Sally question at some point if we find out there's irregularities, that we're in more of a mess here than what we anticipated? Would it then be a Sally question?
Possibly. It
Okay.
certainly wouldn't hurt to ask her. And
Okay.
I know this conversation is difficult, but I'm glad that we're having it. I think that these problems that we're experiencing, they're not new. I think when we
Right.
acquired Vision, when we first went through the reval, that there really wasn't any training. Vision just came in and did their thing and they left. And the staff since that time,
Respectfully,
I disagree with that.
the vision the reval packages include 3 days of staff training, either on site or at Vision's location. So there was a training available. Whether or not people availed themselves of that training, I can't answer.
right. Well, at the time, of course, the assessor's agent was there at the time, but the other staff that's currently working on assessing or providing support hasn't had any training. There hasn't been any training since. So
But we should get, if we need training as an entity, we get training. We don't not get it and just say, well, we didn't have training. That we need to be proactive here.
well, that's fine, as long as you're okay with expending money from the budget.
It's better
And
than
that's
having
something-
mistakes like this and having a legal mess, to be frankly honest. And Julie, we need to find out how, Carly, do you know how many licenses we have with this? I'd love to know if we have open seats for Vision and we missed opportunity.
Don't.
Typical licensing structure for Vision is a contract is 1 to 4 seats is one tier, and then 5 to 6 seats is the next tier, and then the next is 7 to 10 users. It's a fairly significant jump between the 1 to 4 and the 5 to 6.
So who do we
So-
have as users in Vision right now?
Carly,
Right.
Julie, and Lynn.
So then we have a 4th seat open.
No, we have a fourth one for the
No, we
counter.
don't.
A fourth one for the what?
counter
Okay.
for the point of sale computer, that has the fourth module. Which maybe we don't need it up there. Maybe Julie and I can print them from our desk. We really only use it for printing property cards for customers. Maybe that's the one that.
I mean,
we-
that would be ridiculous to assign it to the counter and not provide it to the administrator.
I agree.
Yeah, it's come up before.
Well, we should fix that then, because we should not have training and let our counter sit there and take a free seat when we have this debacle going on.
I agree.
That works for me.
Madeline, what do you think?
If we have an available seat that would allow Christine
So
more,
Christine,
an easier access, that would make absolute sense to me.
okay, Christine, can you make that happen?
I can make it happen, sure.
Okay.
And please get
That would be
training
a
on it
start.
too, so that you can have, you as the administrator have oversight over the department. I'd love for you to be trained and be able to manage any of these situations.
Thank you. It would be helpful.
Perfect.
So I would say even if we can get you some training sooner rather than later also.
Okay. I'll let you
Yesterday?
know what price they come back with.
Yesterday, absolutely. This is just, it's extremely concerning that this is how it's been run when we've assigned a seat to a desk, not a person.
We're all going to learn from this and come out better on the other end.
Absolutely. That's what this is about. This conversation probably should have happened a long time ago.
And Justin brings up an interesting point that we may be stuck with vision. So we can't hide behind we're getting out of vision. We need to figure out what we're doing path forward and not wait 2 years to make a decision. We need to figure out what we need to move forward in an appropriate fashion here.
Right.
And I
Well,
know-
it is 2 years out anyway, so that's a long time.
And I know that
You're right.
Madeline's had some assessor training. I would like some, and Suzanne, would you like some if we can find some?
I'm using my abacus. That's all I need.
Well,
Yes,
I'd like to
do.
learn more about this whole process
I'm totally-
because
I actually
They
had
do it,
a real estate appraisal class in college. So I have somewhat of a real estate background. I'm more than happy to polish up on that. Happy to do
maybe
it.
we can
an
find
appraisal
something.
class is not the same thing. They have, the Department of Revenue runs assessor camp, a week-long training program where they start you with, this is a piece of land, and they work you out from there. It's very detailed, it's very thorough, it's very good, and it was invaluable for, I didn't know how taxes were developed, and I only knew why, because the town and everybody needs money to run. That's basically what I knew. And I know maybe an inch and a half more of a 14-mile long process. It's very, very complicated. There's a reason why it has become a specialty and a specialized profession. It's not simple. So
So in the
absolutely,
future,
you should sign yourself up as soon as they offer it.
I'm not
Typically,
sure I
the
can
future,
do
You
it
can look
out
up
of my
it
schedule.
on the main revenue.
okay.
It's on the main revenue website.
So as we're talking about this, I know
And
it's a difficult subject and I'm not picking on anybody, but do we need to make sure, in the future, when Ron retires, do we need to look at someone who is real versed in this subject and maybe we need to hire
We absolutely do.
a full-time
need
assessor?
To have a full-time, we probably don't need because we're small, but we do need, we need a licensed agent authorized by the state of Maine. And it would be, and they're out there.
Okay.
So we do a search and we find the best one that's available at the time. And we make sure that they are doing their job. And my particular thing at this point, I really wonder if we wouldn't do better if we looked at a contractor rather than an employee, because it's easier to deal with issues with a contractor than it is with an employee.
What's your thought on that,
I
Justin?
mean, if we have a,
Given that it's the family business, again, I should probably stay out of it.
right.
I will summarize and concur with you that yes, there's advantages and disadvantages to both a full-time employee and an agent that's there by contract. So there's pluses and minuses to both sides. Madeline is correct that you do have to have someone who is a certified main assessor, no matter which option you go with. That's statute at this point.
And perhaps there's people out there looking to, you know, with all that's going on, happy to take on a project such as this. Whether it's part.
I'm just thinking, this isn't my priority today, but I think long-term, we do need to think about the town, and we are growing, and we're growing pretty quickly. So long-term, we do need to think about a certified assessor and different things, do business a little bit differently.
I agree.
Well, why don't we
Mine is
go ahead
certified.
and take the steps that we've already outlined and move forward from there?
I think
Thank you,
that's a
Justin,
really good
for-
idea.
Thank you for participating and trying to educate us. We do appreciate it. And Darlene, unfortunately, we have no answers for you tonight, but can assure you that we will continue to look at this.
You're first on our list.
But-
I appreciate that. And
But Darlene, you've raised,
Christine says I have until
go
March
ahead.
2nd to do my abatement. So I may use all of that time trying to figure this thing out.
No, we'll get it
That's
done at least by
fine.
February 20th.
We'll see.
If you want to take that approach, that's fine, Darlene, but if you just want to get the ball rolling, just go ahead and fill out the application and submit it.
You just
I don't
know
have
what
any
numbers to
idea.
put on it. The
I
problem
don't
is,
have any idea what to put on it. I don't know what's right and what's wrong.
yep, that's the problem.
That's my problem.
Yeah, but you're not supposed to have the answers. The taxpayer isn't supposed to provide the answers necessarily to start the process.
So
That's
she
up
can
to you.
submit it without it all being,
Well, I'm supposed to ask for what I want for my abatement, and I don't trust that the person on the other end can figure it out. Honestly,
Well, there's no archive to provide her so that she knows what the original amount was based on is the biggest issue at this point.
yeah. I have nothing to go on.
So we need to figure out her card before she can even apply for that.
is there such thing
well-
as extensions of,
I don't agree with that, but that's fine, if that's the approach you want
So-
to take.
I'll give you the quick rundown. A property owner has 185 days from the date of commitment to file an abatement request. Once the abatement is filed, you have to act on it within 60 days or it's deemed denied. And at that point, the property owner can then file an appeal to the Board of Assessment Review. However, if both parties agree, yes, you can agree to an extension beyond that 60 days.
okay,
Additionally, if the property owner didn't file within 185 days, the Board of Assessors can make a correction within 1 year of the date of commitment on their own initiative in order to correct a wrong.
But we have time to do some research.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't honestly know where to start because I don't know what is correct. I mean, I can put in there exactly what I have for land and the condition of it and the acreage and all that kind of stuff. But
If
then
there are
it's,
conditions that are changed on the property, it's not producing the correct value.
yeah, I don't.
The two value changes, Darlene, I think looking at it from a database perspective would be applying the correct tree growth rates for the type of acreage that's enrolled.
Right.
And then for the acreage that's unenrolled, the biggest question is on the excess land, the 9 acres,
Yep.
on whether or not it should have a discount factor under the condition factor or not. And that's a review of the cost model for what's typically done for a similar size parcel. So
Right.
to research that and figure it out, my suggestion would be to look for another parcel that's also in tree growth that also has acreage that's not enrolled. Hopefully there's one of a similar size that you can make a comparison to see
Yeah.
that the town has been treating the parcels consistently and equitably with each other.
Right. The only thing that's tough is, well, I might be able to find one along the line because the CMP cuts straight through it. We've got like 180 feet gone. I think.
Yeah, that's probably not the condition
might be-
factor. That's probably the street index. So I mean that's another, but that's a smaller multiplier than what I was seeing on the condition factor.
Okay.
So I
Alright.
suspect your primary acre is fine.
Mm-hmm.
The wetland is probably fine. It's
Yeah. and the
should there
tree
be a
growth
condition
sounds
factor
great.
on the 9 acres and apply the correct tree growth factor to the categories.
Okay. I can start there. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for your help, Justin. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you all for hearing my concerns about what's being entered. It's truly, from my perspective, it's truly concern about whether it's systemic or not.
Yes.
You gave us a lot to think about and a lot to work on. Is there any other?
I'm exhausted.
Well, if there's no other, I make a motion that we adjourn.
And I'll second that.
We are adjourned at 7:13.
Everyone have a good
Don't
evening.
forget, we all need to go to town office to
Tomorrow.
sign some stuff tomorrow.
As I get my snowshoes on, we haven't even plowed the driveway yet.
Okay,
So.
thanks, everyone.
Have a good evening.
Christine,
Thank you,
you're
Karen.
back.
Good night.
Good night.